Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Heroes Never Die, your one-stop spot for all things Overwatch. I am your host, Totally Drunk, at tonight on episode 218, and we're going to be taking a look at all of the news around Overwatch, its competitive scene, and so much more. So before we get into the news and introduce you to my co-host, I just want to take a quick moment to thank everyone who is joining us tonight on Twitch for our live show, and thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So joining me tonight, as always, is my co-host editor, and Ed. What a whirlwind of a week it has been. Actually, quite a bit has happened since our last episode. We had a fairly big developer AMA over on the Overwatch Reddit. There's been a lot of stuff happening in the Dallas Fuel House, as well as the Countdown Cup that's happening this weekend, and we got double tokens. We got an Overwatch Pro slash Valorant team debuting. Actually, quite a bit happening. Plus, we got a new patch. We have the return of the summer games. There is a lot happening in such a short week. And, not all of it's great news in some cases, but it is the news nonetheless, which is definitely something that, some of these weeks has just been a little bit of a dry spell, and now it's just like, we got 1 week of floodgates, so who knows how long this is actually going to continue, in this, trajectory.
Yeah, no, it's been a chaotic week. We hit the end of the signing window, so then we got all the news from that. So we shouldn't get any, in theory, shouldn't get any more of any of that information. Plus, we had the AMA. Plus, we had drama. Plus, we had a new event, that not a new event, but a returning event, come up with new skins that are spoiler alert, overall crap. Throwing that out there. But we'll talk about all that later. So we had this this is the most Overwatch stuff we've had to talk about in dare I say months?
Yeah, but on the other side of the coin, a lot of these can kind of get clumped together as individual topics. So while on paper, yes, it is true, there is a lot of news to kind of digest. A lot of stuff can kind of get categorized in a similar fashion. A lot of which, honestly, the majority of which is with the Overwatch League news, with everything going on with the Dallas Fuel. And I can already tell, you are wearing a Decay jersey, and you went out of your way to find it.
Yep, had to get my Decay jersey ready.
Specifically
Ready for
because of the news that hits. And man, what a crazy week it has been for the Dallas Fuel here. A lot of shakeups happening, really from the top down. So let's just jump right in. So the Dallas Fuel have gone out and they released their star DPS player Decay from the team. This is a player who had joined the Fuel during the offseason of 2019 after he was acquired via trade from the Los Angeles Gladiators. So Decay ended up playing 15 matches overall with the Fuel. And, the timing of this end is really something, I tell you, because it comes just a few days after the sign-in deadline close on July 31st. Now, it is worth noting, too, that was extended from, the original June 15th date, obviously due to, the current climate and everything happening with COVID-19. But it does mean that we are not going to be seeing Decay for the remainder of the season. So, we basically had the Fuel owner coming out on social media, over on Twitter, basically throwing Decay under the bus, very similar to what we saw with Rascal. And, he's just saying, Decay did not want to work with the team, we're doing what's best for the team. And, it's an interesting note because of another thing that happened, but more on that here in a bit. But that was not the only change that we saw, as Tickety, who is their assistant coach, also parted ways with the Dallas Fuel. And Tickety had joined the Fuel staff towards the end of the 2018 season after he had coached the Corn Dog team in contenders for Nergraphy. I don't know if you remember that particular team. uh, but wait, and that's not it. We still got like 2 more things to get through. One of which actually happened mere hours before the podcast recorded tonight. But Dallas Fuel also decided to release their head coach, Arrow, from the team. So Yun is going to be the team's interim head coach moving forward. And, you know, a lot can be said about Arrow. This is someone who joined the Fuel back in 2018. Later in the season, it was before the start of Stage 4, who was, basically, Arrow came in as a replacement for their original head coach during the inaugural season, Kai Kai. So, obviously, when you look back, you know, the Fuel in that stage had a pretty good, not pretty good, I mean, good by their standards, record of 6-4. That was back when they were running Brigida, when Brigida was first coming into play. And, you know, they were running Mickey on Brig like 60% of the time. And really, a lot of teams weren't really experimenting too much with Brig at the time. Boy, how that has changed since then. But, you know, we kind of saw steps in the right direction for the Fuel a little bit going into the 2019 season, because they started 9-5. And then they just collapsed during that second half of the season, where they only won a single game out of the 14 games that they played in the final 2 stages. So, in the grand scheme of things, when you look at the overall record that the Fuel had with Arrow at the helm, they were 23-32 in the regular season. Now, Arrow did come out and he said, you know, he's looking for new opportunities inside and outside of coaching. And, you know, he's going to take some time to consider and weigh his options on that front. And then, you know, fast forward to, like, 5 p.m. today, Ed, and we got some more news out of Dallas Fuel, specifically with the removal of Harry Hook from the roster as a result of player misconduct. Now, if you read the comments from Hastro about Decay, and then you go read the Fuel statement about Harry Hook's removal from the roster, man, like, I have to say, the look that Dallas has given here from an organization perspective is not good. So
No.
it basically went from Decay, who, you know, by the looks of it, was someone who burnt out, was called out for not cooperating with his team. And, you know, the team goes on record stating, like, okay, we're going to go out and do what we feel is best for the team. Really just throwing him under the bus. To now, all of a sudden having a player being released due to sketchy behavior. And suddenly the tune changes to, oh, you know, like, we wish Harry Hook the best moving forward, yada, 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 you know, best of luck in your future endeavors. What? Like, what the hell, man? It's just, like, 2 complete polar opposites end of the spectrum here on how they went about, you know, just releasing the news. For 2 completely different reasons. And sure, like, we'll probably never know Decay's side of the story, because he's been pretty hush-hush over the matters, because they did try to reach out to him via one of the translators, and he's not really saying anything in that regard. But, you know, to me, that speaks more of him just not wanting to throw the org under the bus. You know, he doesn't want to be someone to just, like, shift the entirety of the blame. He wants to put himself in the best light. And, you know, let's be real. Decay is in a situation right now where whenever the next sign-in window opens, he can basically pick up a phone and call any team within the Overwatch League, and I bet you they would find a spot on the roster for him. So he has the ball in his court at this given point in time, but, you know, it's still a shame that we were not going to get to see him. But, you know, just given the track record that we have seen with Dallas when it comes to, like, these star caliber DPS players, you know, it's hard not to say that this is going to be for the better of Decay moving forward.
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack here. So here's the deal. The Decay thing, yes, he probably got burnt out, and I'm not putting all the blame on the organization. I think Decay also handled it, from what we know, handled it not very well with the team. Not post getting cut, but handled it well after, obviously, but not very well. Like, because everything we know, he wasn't showing up to practice and stuff like that. So, fine. You know what? You cut him. You leave it at that. But Jerry Hastro Jones, okay, that is his new name because he is the other meddling owner in Dallas. Um, has to come out on top of all that and try and blackball his own player. You know what? We saw this stuff. We've seen this before with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, honestly, like you start talking about like one of the most toxic organizations, and you think, oh, the Titans, oh, Boston, and now you have to throw Dallas into the ring. Like, who wants to work for a guy who's like, you know what, you, if we don't like you, we're just gonna throw you under the bus, because he's done it before. Like you said, Decay is gonna obviously get another job. If Fusion got another opportunity, so will Decay. And I still think Fusion will get another opportunity after he got, you know, shit on by Vancouver after they did whatever the hell they did. So it sucks. Decay has been probably my favorite player in the league for the past year or so. I mean, I'm wearing his jersey, his Gladiators jersey. I
Mm-hmm.
wish he was on the Gladiators personally, but um, you know what, that's fine. You know what, you know, they made this decision. They obviously purposely made the decision after the sign-in window so he couldn't sign with another team to be even bigger dicks about it. uh PSA, I'm not holding back my hatred for the Fuel right now. Like, Dallas just, they did not handle this transition well. Obviously they needed to make a shakeup. I have not been an Arrow fan from the get-go. And I'm assuming he left because, and Ticket, sorry, I assume Tickety, yeah, Tickety is his name,
Mm-hmm.
left because he was an air, like, he was brought in by Arrow, and you don't want one of Arrow's guys. Like, you know how every coach has like their guys. I
Right.
imagine Tickety was one of Arrow's guys. So like he was just a process of lose, like, and it says nothing about how well Tickety is doing. It's a simple fact that they got rid of Arrow, that they got rid of him, and I think they needed to get rid of Arrow. Arrow, I've not hidden my disdain, not disdain, but like I don't get the hype behind Arrow. Like, yeah, he did well with Fusion, Uni, when he had an ungodly amount of talent on there. But as soon as he had to actually coach, he basically went down the shitter. So you know, it's one of those things. I was not high on Arrow. I think Arrow is, honestly, Arrow should be is one of the more analytical people,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he would do well with the Overwatch League on like the desk, or something of that nature. Um, so I think he should actually work for the league, not for another team. Um, as far as Harry Hook goes, I mean, Harry Hook is first off, gets the award for worst apology known to mankind
Well, it wasn't
in the
an
Overwatch League.
apology, really, at all.
Yeah, it wasn't an apology. He defended himself calling girls whores. Like, sorry, if you have to mute that, if you have to censor that, but he was defending calling a girl a whore.
Mm-hmm.
No, like that is not. You can't apologize or issue an apology saying, "Yeah, no, I was justified in calling some women whores." No, that's just not how it works. Like, you just look worse. Like, honestly, if he would have just not said a word, fine. But he actually made himself look 10 times worse by tweeting out that thing. Frickin' Twitter, I tell you, man. Um, So Harry Hook, peace out. Now that's not as big of a deal. Like Harry Hook hasn't been a big deal for the Dallas Fuel.
Yeah, he hadn't played all season.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, we're getting rid of a backup. He was a leftover, really, from the OG days.
Yeah, for Envious.
Yeah. So like, whatever. They just got rid of him. So you know what? It's whatever. Get rid of him. He did some stupid misogynist things. Plain and simple. He apologized and made himself look worse. Dallas Fuel right now, like plain and simple, Dallas Fuel are throwing for this season. From this point on, and they're going to rebuild in the offseason. Whether they're going to build around people like Paintbrush and Onigod, or if they're going to go all Korean, we don't know, obviously. I think the interim coach is just there for an audition to see how he does, and if they excel, maybe he keeps it. But I don't think he keeps it.
No, because at this point he's really just picking up, the remaining pieces. Now,
Yeah, he's there because they have to have a head coach.
Right. I will say, like, if you are moving forward, Crimson. Like, it's hard to say, like, who you would actually keep on this roster. I think Crimso's definitely earned the nod based off of his performance overall. I don't think, like, DPS has really been too much of an issue on that case either. And you might be able to make the argument for Gamzu as well. But in regards to Arrow, it's interesting because looking back, he's always been very close with, like, the players that he has coached. So it seems to me like with that type of mentality, he'd be better suited for some sort of, like, player personnel, whether it's on a team or as, like, a player coach or, some other position within the league. But it's just like, yes, he's won championships, but when you factor in how much talent were in both of those situations, Fusion Uni at the time was lights out. Honestly, probably the best team in the world, like, across all contenders at that given point in time. It's hard to say how much of that was actually his planning, because even after Arrow got called up, Fusion Uni was still rolling, even after some of their players were getting called up to better opportunities as well. But it's gonna be an interesting week, man. Dallas is entering the Countdown Cup. They have the Justice, who are one of the lower seeds for this tournament, and I don't know, like, Crimzo flew back home to be with his mom because his mom's been dealing with breast cancer, and we don't know, like, how long Crimzo was going to be out, so, like, he's kind of out of the equation. Obviously, Decay won't be playing, so you're left with Doha and Onigod. Not that that's, like, a bad thing by any means, but they don't really have the star power quite to the level that Decay has. And, right now, it's just, like, what look are we going to get out of them, and how is Yun going to step up during, like, this trial phase moving forward? Because you have to imagine at this point, kind of like going into this situation this week, as Yun, you have to feel like you are on a short leash, because at this point, you're probably not expected to really be able to do anything to salvage any part of this season. All I can really do is hope that by the time that the playoffs come around at the end of the season, that, maybe you could, scrape together a few wins, place a little bit higher overall, get a little bit more of that prize money. But that's a very tall order on such a short amount of, like, turnaround time here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting much. Like, I'm actually predicting the Justice to win this week, versus the Fuel. But it's just because he's, like, he's a dead fish almost at this point. He can only do good. He can't do bad. So he's got everything to win here. but it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they perform because like they've been playing with the same roster for like a while now without Decay in the lineup.
Right.
And obviously Harry Hook not playing, so it's not like we're going to see a different team. It's going to be more how are they going to handle all the changes.
Yeah, like what sort of approach in regards to like the strategies and the compositions are we going to be seeing? So it's going to be more so on the execution in play, more so than what we had kind of seen in the past on that front. But looking elsewhere in Texas, we also have some news out of Houston as the Outlaws are down another original Outlaw player, as Raucus has retired from the Overwatch League. Now, let's be real. We knew this was coming. This is not sudden or out of the blue. There were a lot of rumors that Raucus was going to be retiring from Overwatch to pursue a career in Valorant. And that is exactly the case, as I know the news dropped earlier today, actually, that Raucus has signed with FaZe Clan to join their Valorant team. Now, it's worth noting, Ed, that, there's a lot of intrigue about this particular story. On one front, when you look back at Raucus's career, FaZe Clan was the first opportunity that he had within esports. So in a way, this is essentially a homecoming for Raucus, and now he's going to get, to try to, get to the top level in another esport title.
Yep.
And then outside of that, like, there are a lot of familiar names on this Valorant squad for FaZe because that's where former Atlanta Reign DPS Baby Bay went. Former Washington Justice DPS Corey is on FaZe, as well as, former Fusion Uni / Dallas Fuel DPS Zachary. So it's just like, we have a little bit of an Overwatch squad entering the Valorant scene, and I'll be honest, I definitely have some intrigue. I haven't been overly enthusiastic about Valorant because it's not really my cup of tea. But the intrigue to see how a majority Overwatch team is going to do, knowing that, there's already some camaraderie there between them, even though they really haven't played beside one another. But I want to see how that sort of team is going to do against these teams that have primarily been made up of, like, these CSGO background players.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there's a couple of like Overwatch teams. Now, this is the most dominant one, but what was the other one? Second Wind. Second Wind basically got a Overwatch Valorant team as well because they got Boostio and our boy.
Yeah, sugar free.
Our boy Sugar Free.
God,
so
I
you know
hope
what?
to play in this weekend.
Like here's the thing is Valorant is not my game. It is 100% not my game. I'm not good at it. I don't like that style of play. To me, it's boring. But, I actually semi-enjoy pro Valorant. Like watching pro Valorant. To me, it's like watching COD. Like, I'm not a COD player, but I don't mind watching pro COD. Because you know what, you get to see some of the best aim in the world when it comes to this. So, like, I will be checking them out 100% because right now, like, I think Sinatra's team won the last big tournament.
Yep, that was Sentinels. And
Yeah,
FaZe
that's
is
Sentinels.
doing an invitational this weekend.
Yeah. So I might check that out. Actually, I probably will check that out when I can. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think the weirdest thing for me to think of is Raucus going pro in an FPS. He's the first one where I'm like, oh, he's a healer.
Well, maybe he'll just play Sage.
Like, you know what I mean? But like, you don't think of like healers being like some aim gods. Like,
I mean,
they
a few
have that
might come to mind, but not the majority.
exactly. You expect like this is the first time we've heard of like a non DPS Overwatch player
Mm-hmm.
switching over to Valorant.
Right.
Like we have a flex support going over to Valorant. So it will be interesting to see how he performs. But I mean, Corey is already, I guess, supposed to be ridiculously good at the game
Mm-hmm.
from everything I've read, and I don't know about Baby Bay. Zachary's always been a god tier aimer.
Right.
So that makes sense to me that he actually would be playing it. So I think they're golden there. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this is. And you know what? I get to make fun of Ramses about another outlaw player being bad and quitting the league in Raucus.
Mm-hmm. And if he flops in the second game, that's even more fuel to the fire.
Mm-hmm.
But man, like I really hope that Second Wind is also going to be in this invitational this weekend, because
Oh, that would be
I'd be
amazing.
really curious to see those two teams face off. But we'll check that out. So that will be happening this weekend, along with the Countdown Cup. So always a ton of esports happening in regards to FPS games out there. Now, in other roster news for the Overwatch League, we have the Atlanta Reign turn into Third Impact to sign a new flex support. And man, and like Third Impact players just keep pouring into the Overwatch League. I think it's like the third or
Mm-hmm.
fourth one at this point in like the second half of this season. So the latest to join is their flex support, Elris, who has been signed by the Reign. And prior to joining Third Impact, Elris had been on Metathena, Far East Society. I'm not too familiar with that particular team. Obviously, Metathena more well known in regards to Contenders Korea.
Yes.
But on Third Impact, this was the team who we're basically playing second fiddle to Team Doge, who were, former NV, who were just running the field, essentially. But Third Impact was a fairly close second in regards to Contenders NA. And,
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the Reign right now, it is a secondary flex support option for the team alongside Dogman. No, and part of that just happens to be because, Kodak recently, got bumped up to be, a coach on the team. So, he freed up a slot essentially. Now we have Elris coming in. And we've already seen a little bit of play from him this past weekend. But, it really seems like Atlanta for the longest time here has not really set their like lineup, but like I don't imagine we're in a situation where all of a sudden Dogman is gonna start seeing the bench more and more. This might be more of a map specialist type role, I would imagine, unless there's a very specific meta where, or a hero in particular that they feel like Elris is the better option over Dogman, or maybe Dogman just feeds out of his mind on Ilios, and they decide to just pull him right out.
Like here's the thing is I normally would think, oh yeah, no, Dogman's doing quite a good job. They're not going to replace him, but I've thought that about so many people
Mm-hmm.
and about bringing in people that like most people like have never even heard of. And that I can 100% see Dogman losing his spot. I'm not going to predict that he's going to, but I could see it. Um, it will be interesting to see what they do because probably one of the least predictable teams in the league as far as lineup is might be the Atlanta Reign. The other is the Philadelphia Fusion. But the Atlanta Reign is definitely one of those like, what the hell are you gonna do?
Yeah, because I mean we've seen Saucy already coming into play. Sharp unfortunately has been getting the short end of the stick basically throughout the entirety of the season on that DPS rotation. But again, that's partially because Edison and Airster just like cover so much of the hero pool that it's just like, well, where do you plug in some of these players in that regard?
Mm-hmm.
But a little bit easier to do it with the flex support, as opposed to DPS in this case for the Atlanta Reign. So outside of that, really the only other thing that we saw here as of late was the Hanjo Spark announcing that the departure of their head coach Mask, and they have opted to promote their assistant coach, Pagian, to the head coach. Now, this one's kind of interesting because Mesk had basically been with the Spark, since the get-go. He's been on since the inaugural season. Pagian obviously came over recently from Vancouver Titans back when they were a good team and not, the current iteration that we have now. This is back when, they had a runaway.
Were they a good team earlier in the year with the Runaway?
Not necessarily, but, I felt like that's more the environment that they were playing in. It felt like the orb just kind of like left them in the dark. So I don't know. It just seems like there was a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, and I can only imagine that completely boomed their mental at that case. But, very unfortunate turnaround in that case, going from the team that they were to the team that we saw, hitting the stage earlier this season. But the Hanzhou Spark, another team who, as we kind of noted on OWL by the numbers, has been fairly middling. And yes, with the regional splits, they've been kind of like middle of the pack in regards to APAC, who only has 7 teams in that region. They've been hovering around 50-50 basically throughout the majority of the season. They've gone out, they've picked up, a few people, like obviously the big one being Architect. And, they got QOQ because Rio wasn't playing. And it still honestly feels like this is still a team that is trying to just get their shit together.
Right?
And, if you're middling here, and there's only 7 teams, it's just like, well, you're really only favored to be beaten 2 of them? So it's really hard to see how much this team is going to be able to progress right now, knowing that they are clearly behind Guangzhou, New York, and Shanghai. And, more times than not, whenever they do face those 3 teams, hasn't necessarily been too close of a contest either. So it's very cut and dry here with APAC.
Yeah. It is very cut and dry. And they probably just wanted to shake things up a little bit. Sometimes just having a different head coach will do it for you. And you know what? I'm fine with that. Sometimes, it just doesn't work out. They're not switching up the players. I think they still have very, very, very talented players. I think they just want to change up coaches and see if they can find a better fit, like somebody who can coach these players a little better. And that's not even a knock on the coaching. That's a knock on, it takes a certain coach to coach certain players. Like they may be better off coaching somebody else, but not these particular players, and so on and so forth. So they're just changing things up. But you know what? Yeah, it's another thing. Like it's with the fuel, making these kind of switches. They're kind of throwing in not the towel. Like they're not throwing in the towel as much as the fuel were, but they are definitely like saying, I like, what's the best way I can describe it? We need to make something a change without it being too drastic, and hopefully it will work out. But we're not banking on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not like this isn't. It's not. Pagion, is that how you pronounce it? Pagian. Like this is a tryout for him, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But he's coming in with more of a chance than the guy who took over in the fuel was.
Yeah, that would be Young.
Mm-hmm. It's he's coming in with more of a background with the team, I think.
He's also has a better track record.
Yes.
As well.
So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I don't expect them to pop off. I don't think they're going to be like, oh, we got a new coach. We're now going to be competing with, the New York Excelsior and the Charge.
Yeah,
and the
but
Shanghai Dragons at
I,
this point.
I feel like there's more of a case to be made in the Spark here, because when you look at the brackets for the Countdown Cup, it kind of got thrown off because the Hunters had kind of been on a little bit of a roll, so they didn't get in the second seed. So when you look at the teams around the Spark in those opening rounds leading into the semis, you have the Dynasty, the Spitfire, and the Hunters, all of whom have been historically this season worse than the Spark. So I feel like just the way that, you know, these recent weeks have played out has actually been to the Spark's benefits. So this is actually a fairly good opportunity for them to actually capitalize on the opportunity at hand, where, you know, they could make a run here. Who knows? Maybe they might even make it to the finals to, you know, face one of the better teams out there in APAC. So I don't know what to expect with APAC, but
I actually expect the way everything fell. I actually predict them making it to the finals. Because I mean they have to beat the Seoul Dynasty, and then they have to beat either London or the Hunters, which I think they're all better than. They for some reason lucked out, and they don't have to face the Charge or the Excelsior or the Dragons.
yeah, that's because of Chengdu.
Yeah. So like it's I mean it's a good they definitely hit the lucky roll, and I totally see them making it to the finals.
Yeah, definitely an easier run as opposed to really any side of either bracket in this case.
True.
So obviously, you know, this is going to be the final tournament in regards to like the monthly tournaments that we've been seeing here for the Overwatch League. The next big thing, of course, being the playoffs towards the end of the season. And, you know, if you're viewing games this week, worth noting, double token drops. So keep that in mind. So we have the North America tournament starting on Friday. We got 4 matches in the knockout rounds. You know, looking at how the seeding shaped up, your top 4 teams who will get to choose their opponents after the knockouts. You have the San Francisco Shock, Paris Eternal, Philadelphia Fusion, and the Florida Mayhem. So when you look at the knockout rounds, you know, like, I would say there's some interesting matches, but I'll be honest, I don't think any of these are, like, absolutely spectacular by any stretch of the imagination. You have the LA Gladiators versus Toronto Defiant. I think
Which is probably the best.
that one is the best, I think, on paper. You have the Washington Justice facing Dallas Fuel. And again, like, that could be the upset potential here.
Yep.
Which, you know, I'd be really curious to see if the Shock would just outright pick the Justice because they would technically be the worst seed remaining, or if they still want to have the satisfaction of snuffing out the flame of one of the LA teams because of, you know, the California
No, you
Cup.
don't do that in the playoffs. You pick the worst possible team. So like yeah, I think the Justice will beat the Fuel, and they're more than likely going to be the choice. They could pick the Outlaws if they beat the Valiant, and they will 100% pick the Titans if they beat the Rain, but I don't think either one of those situations is likely. So yeah, it's either way, I think the winner of this match is going to be the Shock's pick
Okay.
over anyone else.
So when you're looking at brackets, I don't have my bracket up, but you know, a lot of talk has been kind of like revolving around the San Francisco Shock. Obviously, there's been some experiments going on with who's gonna play Genji this week. You know, we've seen Rascal, we've seen Super at times, we've seen Talio stepping in as well. So, if you're the Shock here, Ed, you know that bonus wins are on the line, money's on the line. Do you feel like we're gonna get some fuckery in regards to the Genji play from the Shock in this particular tournament? Or will it be kind of like all hands on deck, running Rascal or Talio in this case?
I think it will be all hands on deck unless it's a complete and utter ass whooping. Like, unless it's like you're so dominant against them, they could see some tomfoolery going on. But when it comes to, all right, there's a difference between a regular season game
Mm-hmm.
and a playoff game. You know what? You screw around like that in a regular season game, there is a chance you could lose, but it's not that big of a deal because you can just make it up in the playoffs rather easily. In the playoffs, in this, the Countdown Cup, it's a one loss, you're out. So they're not going to screw around like that. I fully expect them to, you know, go all out in this one.
All right, so at the end of the day, which team are you back in to walk out the Countdown Cup champions? Because we've seen unique champs so far. Do you expect that to continue here?
I do think it will be the Shock. I think I have to go with the Shock on this one. It's so hard not to.
You know,
Because they're just so good. I mean, if I was to pick a surprise, not a surprise team because they're the number 2 seed, I could see the Paris Eternal coming through. But that would have to be on hard carries by Sparkle.
I think for me, based off the recent play, just because, like, there still is part of me that feels like Shocker's still trying to negate the narrative that playing Super is a throw, that they might entice them to actually still play Super. But I've been really impressed with the Fusion here in these recent weeks. Honestly, playing some of the cleanest Overwatch that we've seen from them throughout the entirety of the season. Like, I feel like they've really put themselves in a position to make a run here. So I'm going to back them for the Countdown Cup. You know, they'll have all hands on deck as well. And, you know, I feel like when you compare, you know, the Fusion and the Shock, yes, I know, like, the last game might not have been super close. But I really feel like the Fusion have really started to come into their own in this meta as well. So I feel like at this point, obviously Shock, Eternal, and Fusion are all pretty lights out. You know, it feels like all three of them are kind of jockeying for position on who's going to be like the NA carry in this case. But, you know, I'm pulling for the unique champions across the board. And then, you know, in the long run, I still expect the Shock to run with the playoffs towards the end of the season. Now, moving on to APAC. Very intriguing matches. You know, I'm excited for this one. So, Shanghai, they earned their bye into the semifinals because they are the top seed again. Which leaves our other matches of the New York Excelsior versus the Guangzhou Charge. Honestly, like, out of all of the matches on either side, that's the best one by far.
Yes. 100%.
It's not even
no ifs,
close.
ands, or buts. It's not even remotely close.
And both of those teams have played each other super close every time as well, so there's extra intrigue there. We have the Seoul Dynasty versus the Hangzhou Spark, and that leaves us with the London Spitfire versus the Chengdu Hunters. Alright, so Chengdu being a surprise team, come in. They string together like a 3-win streak. They earn a number 2 seed and going into the Countdown Cup. And now all of a sudden everyone's like, wait a minute, like, are Chengdu back? Like, do they have that upset potential?
No.
And it's just like, I understand people want to run with the narrative. But there comes a point in every Hunter life where their awkwardness and just the way that they approach the game does not work.
No.
And I can't imagine a situation here where we're entering the Countdown Cup. You know, you have a main coming out on the Wrecking Ball. They pair it with Zarya. I do not see how that sort of composition is going to be able to work. Because APAC had primarily been running that Winston-Zarya combination, and, you know, when you compare Winston to the Wrecking Ball, just the space management or just creation that you can get when you're making the dives is just night and day differential here. Like, a Wrecking Ball just can't create the same opportunities that a Winston can for, the flankers that will be run in these compositions throughout this tournament. So that's not to say that London have been lights out by any stretch of the imagination. They've had, they've had moments of like really good synergy, and then other moments where they do look like one of the bottom teams in their specific region. But I still feel like from top to bottom, that is a more complete team, and they've been more consistent throughout the season. Whereas the Hunters, basically like all season outside of like this last 2 week stretch, they've been a couple of steps behind the rest of the region here.
Yeah, I mean, I under no circumstances do I see the Hunters actually doing anything. They may win the first round. They may. But more than likely, I see them losing in the second round to either the Spark, which I assume is going to be the Spark, or the Dynasty if they somehow upset them. Um, so, yeah, it's definitely going to be weird. I I don't. Yeah, I everyone wants to be on the hype train for them, and I'm just not seeing it. Like, I know they're the 2 seed, I'm just not seeing it.
Well, just because they're the 2 seed doesn't mean that they're going to get too far. That's just
Exactly.
the way it is. But anyways, so I mean, just looking at the way that the bracket is laid out, I mean, to me, Spark Dragon seems like the most likeliest of finals in this case. Where I've definitely tipped Dragons in that case, and it's very hard to argue against the Dragons, knowing that they've only dropped like 2 games the entirety of the season here.
Yeah, it's you kind of almost have to go Dragons.
And they haven't had the New York problem where they look really good in the regular season, and then all of a sudden come playoffs or a tournament, they just don't really progress that far, or they get to the finals and they lose. But I don't know. Either way, APAC is always exciting.
Yeah, the Dragons are my obvious choice to win this. But it's not as obvious to me as the Spitfire, as the Shocker.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would not be surprised if the Charge or the Excelsior pulled out a win.
Right. Well, I mean, one of them is gonna have to pull out a win because they have to
pull
advance.
out the win of it all. You smart
I know
ass.
what you mean. Jeez.
You're killing me, Smalls. You're killing me. But it's definitely going to be more interesting, especially for matches that I won't be watching.
Yeah.
So, I'll get a recap. How about that?
There you go. All right, well, let's shift gears and see what's going on around Overwatch in-game. So, a lot happening with the AMA that happened on the Overwatch Reddit with the development team, aka Team 4. Really, a lot of people involved with this. Okay, so for starters, we got some rework news about what heroes that they are taking a look at. And I know they said like, okay, we're gonna look at these heroes ahead of Overwatch 2. That's still a pretty wide range of time, so who knows like what the spread is. So obviously recently they've been taking a lot of looks at Moira. We actually have more news on that here in a little bit. But lead hero designer Jeff Goodman said that Symmetra, Mei, Brigitte, and Roadhog are all up for potential reworks. Now, what I find interesting about this, Ed, is the fact that all of those heroes have that sort of hybrid characteristic where you feel like they could be tweaked to be in a different role within Overwatch. And he did note, like, Symmetra would be the first one that come to mind, so it's right at the top of the list in this case. Now, we have seen the development team try to rework Symmetra in the past as a support. and they failed in that regard. But they look to be keen on trying it again. And Goodman's comment on it was maybe if she had some other primary way to heal, and the turrets were just a way to provide auxiliary healing, it might have gone better. So basically, when they were making some changes, the turrets, the car wash would actually be a heal, and then it really wasn't. It like felt bad because like you couldn't really like spread them out and be like super effective. So then they're like, okay,
Hmm.
well, like we're gonna just increase the amount of turrets that you could have, and then they still didn't feel like that was going to be right. But when you
Yeah.
look at some of the other heroes here, a lot of people look at, you know, Roadhog, and of course, there's been a talk of DPS Roadhog. I remember one of the environmental cards in particular kind of like made some of the tank heroes more damage heavy. So they kind of toyed with that already. Brigida, obviously having a shield and being a shield bearer, a lot of people are like, okay, well, you can make her a tank. Mei, for whatever reason, has always been like, oh yeah, we could easily make this character a tank, but that would definitely have to include some changes, probably primarily to her alternate fire. I can't imagine her having a snipe and being a tank at the same time if they were to even look in that general direction here. But in hindsight, it's just like there's definitely some discussion here about, the hybrid characteristics. Obviously, there are heroes within the game that could easily get pulled in one direction or the other. So, out of these ones that are up for reworks, are there any in particular that you feel like could move into another category within Overwatch here?
I don't like the idea of switching them over to different categories. I mean, I guess they could do it, but it'd take a lot of rework to do so.
Hmm.
Like a lot of rework to do so, and I don't think that's quite possible right now. I don't think Mei as a tank is very good because you'd have to do a complete rework of Mei, complete rework of Mei, and I don't think that's something that is worthwhile. Um, but maybe Roadhog. No, Roadhog needs to stay as a DPS, as a tank. Like, it just needs to stay there.
Well, the problem is, it's just we don't see Roadhog.
Roadhog, I think it's the character more than anyone else, more than any other character in the game, needs to be um completely reworked. Like 100% completely reworked. But that's, I mean, yeah. I think that will be huge to him because he's probably one of my favorite to play,
Hmm.
and we never get to play him.
And, well, we do in Mystery Heroes.
In Mystery
And maybe if we're
Heroes,
dicking around
yes.
in quick play, we can make the occasional exception.
Yeah, it's just it's nice. Like, you know what I took away from this is, you know what sucks is they're talking about reworking heroes,
Hmm.
and I'm like, I just want Overwatch 2 news. If you're talking about reworking heroes, that's not something that I want at all at this point. I want Overwatch 2.
Well,
So
I know there were reports from Slasher that virtual BlizzCon is confirmed for early next year.
yes.
So it's very hard not to speculate that we wouldn't really hear anything until then. Which I hate to say, but it's just like, it's just
I
honest.
don't think they're gonna be in a year and a half plus from Overwatch from the announcement to Overwatch 2. I don't think it's going to be a year and a half. Plus, I don't think that's the case. Especially since they said there's no more new heroes.
Right.
So then they would say, okay, we're also going to go 9 months to a year and a half with no new hero.
Well,
So no new hero, no new anything would kill the game.
okay, so other announcement venue, so to speak. Gamescom coming
Yep.
up end of August. That's the other place where we would generally get major Blizzard announcements.
Mm-hmm.
So if we enter Gamescom and we don't hear anything, do you think at that point then would be more of a time to panic in this case?
Yes, 100%. That's when I'd start panicking about the overall health of the game.
Right.
And I've been pretty like, you know what, we'll trust in Blizzard. We trust with this game, but I think that long without anything new is beyond detrimental to the game.
Yeah,
because all you're just gonna do is bleed out everyone who plays.
Yeah, unless at some point within that time frame they do decide to go free to play, which
I don't even know if that would help.
I feel like it's still a
don't know.
necessarily step though at this point when you consider like how much competition there is at this
In the
point.
free to play.
And also like how long into the game's life cycle we are. You know? I mean, it's 4 years at this point, so oh man. I don't know. But either way, like I'm really hoping we'll hear something at Gamescom on the Overwatch front. Even if it's just like, hey, like we're gonna have a beta this fall, you know?
Yeah, anything. That would be amazing. If they
that's
like
really what we need. Is literally
if they so if they announce beta in like late October, November or something like that, and like at BlizzCon, it's like the game's now live, blah blah blah. You know what I mean? That's fine. That's fine with me. They don't wait to announce anything really until BlizzCon in early 2021. Then you know what? No.
It's just unfortunate not knowing. Feels bad, man.
Yeah.
Well, also in this AMA, quite a bit of other stuff. The dev team also hinted at some new features that could be heading to multiplayer. So principal game designer Scott Mercer was asked about, kind of like the positional change in regards to Six Stacks and whether or not the dev team kind of like regretted going back on it. And, Mercer kind of like commented on that and noted that, they have some cool ideas around competitive formats using the fixed 6-player team. So, pre-made in this case. And he said it would likely take the form of short-duration tournaments rather than months-long seasons like we have now. I don't know what to make of this. I know for a while, obviously, like, people have been, like, clamoring for, like, a clan-type system, and they've wanted, like, some sort of, like, skill rating for, when a clan would enter competitive. But I don't think Blizzard is ever going to be in a position where they would make clans for one game specific. Because we've seen, like, the communities popping up, like, through Battle.net, and it's been more universal. And if they don't have a way to, like, link everything within the same thing, I don't think it's gonna happen at all. But the idea of tournaments is intriguing to me. I don't know if, like, this would be, like, a secondary thing to, like, earn competitive points in this case. Where, hopefully, Ed, they really need to do something else with competitive points. Whether it is just weapon skins or, like, something else. We just need something outside of just, like, the golden gun at this point in time. And I'm pretty sure somewhere within that AMA, like, they commented on weapon skin speed a good idea, and that they would kind of like look into other ways that they could bring more use out of CP as a whole. But in regards to like short duration tournaments, like I wonder exactly how this would work. Would like they do set brackets where you have tournaments based on what your skill rating is? So you have like a gold bracket, you have your plat, so on and so forth. But like, what would be the reward out of that? Like, would it just be CP? Would you get like a special player icon, like what we've seen with like the competitive seasons? Because I could definitely see them just being like, okay, you can get a spray, you can get a player icon, but I don't know how much interest that would warrant from a six stack sort of community there. You're muted.
Shit. All right. I don't know how well it would be. It's a very much a higher end request in the game that I don't think is something everyone really wants. Now, if they introduce a clan system across all games, Blizzard games, that's a whole different story.
Mm-hmm.
That is something I could 100% get behind. But as far as like tournaments and the potential map vetoes and crap like that, I I don't know if that's really the thing. Because you can have tournaments already. Like you can do that in game with custom lobbies and stuff like that. So now it's not for ranked points, so might be a little bit different. But I don't see them tweaking stuff like that. Anytime they add like a different mode, I think it dilutes the player pool,
Mm-hmm.
and that is bad for the game. And they've diluted it probably as much as they possibly can at this point, especially with adding another ranked system
Yeah,
in
with
there.
like the open
The
queue.
open queue, yeah, like that is a bit much. I think if they dilute it any more, it's going to be detrimental to the game. But as far as ranked rewards, yeah, they 100% need to add something else. Because no offense, gold guns. Anyone who's been playing this game for any amount of time probably has all the gold guns they want, and honestly, they're not that cool. They need something else.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's nice to know that they're looking at stuff like this. Unlike Hearthstone, who has openly said we're not having tournament modes.
Yeah.
Still bitter.
Well, they better get those 8-player custom lobbies for Battlegrounds.
Yeah, sooner or later.
Outside of that, our dev and savior, Pop Jeffrey Cap praise him. He actually noted what his biggest regret in the game's existence is. And that's saying, like, this is... I don't know if I agree with our dev and savior. So Kaplan says, sometimes I wish we had kept offense and defense heroes rather than merging them into damage, and only allowing offense heroes to be played on attack and defense to be played on defense. I know that idea might sound crazy and stupid, but I think it would have allowed us to be more all in on some niche hero designs like Torbjorn, Symmetra, and Bastion. Now, the change to like the classifications for the heroes within Overwatch happened in 2018. That's when they merged offensive damage heroes into one role. But I have to say, like, I I I get the idea, right? Like it makes sense. Like you're on attack, use attack heroes. Like but at the end of the day when you talk about Overwatch, the game is always about being able to pick up any hero and play.
Mm-hmm.
So with that alone, if they were to go in a direction like this, and that's not to say that they can't throw something like this on experimental, because they could, you kind of like destroy the actual identity of the game. Now, does that mean that, character designing couldn't see some benefits if they were strictly offense and, defense? I actually think it would be more to the benefit and offer a lot more freedom in this case, because you would be designing a character with a more like clear vision in mind on like what the concept should be, or like what are they going to try to like combat against or like counter in this case.
Mm-hmm.
But like on paper though, like this just screams like I do not want to see this. But there's still a little part of me that would be intrigued to see what the base sort of lineups would be, because obviously your tanks and supports would be open. It'd be the damage that would kind of be split here. But, like, would it just be, okay, we're going to be run and dive, and then the other team on defense is just, okay, we're just going to run bunker? Like, we'll have Bastion, Torb, and then you can run, like, your Sombra, Genji, your Tracer, Asher, whatever. Like, I don't know. But I just feel like the game would be a lot harder to kind of balance with the attack versus defense sort of mindset going into, development of, further assets there.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. It would be, but they would have also balanced all the heroes very differently. So I get where he's coming from on this. It's by combining him, he made some characters just bad and useless. Whereas if they were on offense and defense, it would have been much easier to not have those unplayable characters, let's say.
Right.
Or the less desirable characters played. Would have made it easier for them to be playable. And you would have needed less drastic reworks to get them playable. So I get that from that standpoint, but no, this is not something ever. No, let's just never do this.
Jeff, you are right. It does sound crazy.
And not something I think we ever want.
All right. Well, another AMA news. Man, like, there's a lot of stuff in here. And I cherry-picked, the better stuff, but there's still other things in the AMA that are worth discussing. But, of course, we'll have the thread in our show notes for you guys to check out. Anyways, update on Moira. Obviously, Moira has been the major experiment that has been ongoing with Team 4 here as of late. We saw the Fade uproar with the last experimental card. And, looks like they are going to try a new approach. So, lead designer Jeff Goodman gave us a bit of insight on what their plan is for the next version of Moira Experimental. So, Goodman noted that Fade will work very similar to Wraith Form, but is more of a mobility skill, so it's something that is being probed. And the version 2 experimental card is coming soon. You could throw the Blizzard trademark on that. But basically, with this version 2, Moira is still going to be able to phase out her allies, but won't be able to remove debuffs like the Ana Bionade. And you're not going to be able to break people out of ultimates like the Graviton Surge, like Sigma's Gravitic Flux. And those are really, like, two of, the biggest leads about this past iteration. Now, that's not to say that it still won't be broken, because we don't know if they're gonna, like, make any tweaks in regards to the Fade cooldown or anything like that, or the duration of, the phase of the allies in this case either. But do you feel like the community outcry, looking ahead, like, knowing what the general picture is at this point ahead of time, do you feel like that's going to differ at all, or do you still feel like people are just going to outright being like, oh my god, WTF, Blizz, this is still broken and we don't want it.
No, I actually think by getting rid of the actual parts that were broken, it makes it no different than what it is now. Truly, like unless you have perfect timing, it doesn't really do anything. Let's be real here. Like 1 second of you can't take damage is not, and you have to time it perfectly for it to be truly effective. Is not something that's going to be game breaking, and not something that's going to change the way that it works. So I don't know. I don't like this change at all. I don't think it's a worthwhile change that will make her good or not. I did not hate the last change either. I just think it needed to be on a larger cooldown. That's the
Or
only problem I had with it.
yeah, or as I said, like I think if something was to be that potent, it should have been an ultimate for Moira. But that would also entail other changes on top of that,
Yeah.
which we haven't heard about because the main focus here has been on the Fade ability as a whole. Now outside of that, there's another priority that is on the table that our Davin Savior, Papa Jeffrey Cap, praise him, weighed in on in regards to like issues currently impacting Overwatch. Obviously, Kaplan highlighted that the double shield meta, biggest priority for the team right now. Now, Kaplan says that a new experimental card is expected to be released here within the next few weeks, which should mean that we'll have some balance updates in regards to the current meta that we are seeing. Now, we have already seen a couple of nerfs to Genji, because Genji came out in the last patch, was really powerful. They scaled him back down a little bit. But it just seems like for the longest time here, they haven't really been too happy with shields in general. Obviously, they've made tweaks to armor. They've really kind of like shifted the number values in regards to how many like hit points shields have. So I don't know like what direction they're going to do, whether they're going to try to like impact the like uptime of shields in general, whether they're going to tweak the number values of how much hit points the shields actually have within the game. But I can't imagine it's going to be a situation where they're going to tone down a ton of like the damage dealers in this case. So, I don't know what route they're going to do with this because, we've seen multiple iterations of shields so far. And it just seems like at this point we haven't really found any sort of middle ground in regards to the values here.
I mean, there's a bunch of routes they could go with shields that I think could be drastic, but could also not be. I'm thinking more along the lines of abilities that might go through shields, or the abilities that maybe disable shields. Like, for instance, Pharah's knockback. If you're Reinhardt and you get knocked back, it disables your shield while it's almost like a stun, but like your shield lowers. But that's more for Reinhardt, and then an Orisa. There could be other abilities that like they could be like, oh, okay, God, I can't even think of it. Logically, no, that actually doesn't make sense. Like no kind of projectile could go through the shield. How are they gonna?
Okay, so what they do,
Exactly. You at that point
you auto slot Symmetra in every comp. Boom.
Yeah.
Solved.
Like, yeah, like it's one of those things where if they don't screw with the uptime of the shields or the health of the shields or the regen of the shields, then I think there's not much they can do
Right.
about the double shields. So
Knowing Blizzard though, they're gonna double dip in regards to the tweaks that they're going to make. It's not just gonna be okay, we're only gonna go into lower the hit points of the shield. It's probably gonna be, cooldown, hit points or like cooldown region or hit point region, whatever combination is gonna be. But like it's not gonna be a situation where they're just gonna lower literally everything, because you're gonna get to the point now where you're just like, okay, well your tank is essentially an alt battery at this point.
What if they increase the non-shield heroes to make them more viable?
In regards to like what sort of value?
In regards to main tank-ish
Okay.
stature, they could change. They could make tweaks to Winston that could make him more main tanky, or something along the lines of for Wrecking Ball, make him a little bit more main tanky. Even Roadhog, I think, could be more main tanky. In regards to like, say, the damage done to Roadhog is 50% alt charge, 50% less alt charge.
I could see them maybe doing like the damage Roadhog takes increases is like primary healing with his take a breather.
Mm-hmm. Or Wrecking Ball's like self shield when they hit it. If you're within 10 yards of another hero, they also get a shield. Something along those lines. I don't know. There's a lot of routes they could go on, and I don't know what they're gonna do.
Well, we'll know in the next few weeks.
Yes.
So, that'd be kind of be weird if they drop experimental card during an event. I'm just throwing it out there.
Right? I don't think they will.
But crazy things have happened. I mean, you heard it from Jeff himself. He feels like we should have only attack and defense heroes. But anyways, moving on. Of course, the big news this week in regards to in-game is the new patch that dropped this Tuesday on August 4th. With it, we have the return of Summer Games, and of course, we got a ton of new cosmetics that we need to talk about. So we got 5 new legendary skins. We have 2 new highlight intros, a new emote, 3 new metal poses, 7 new player icons, 2 new sprays, ton of voice lines, and more in this case. So Ed, I know earlier you mentioned I'm not really a fan of
no,
of
I
the
am
lineup.
not a fan at all. I think I think they're pretty bad. Like
Oh,
I don't know. Like the Pharah skin is actually decent. I'm just
okay.
bringing up here
Okay,
what
so
they all are.
for those that haven't seen the skins yet, you have Tropical Baptiste, where basically, Bap has like a palm tree patterned shirt, he's got white khaki shorts, and for some reason there's a plant sticking out of his gun. You have the Fiskarn Brigida, where Brig is essentially a fisherwoman, and her mace actually serves as like a fishing rod. I actually really like the Brig skin. That's probably my favorite one out of the lot.
Yeah.
You have Karate Doomfist. Doomfist happens to be a black belt. And for whatever reason, his fist is now blue and gold in that skin. You have the Surf's Up Echo, where her Echo has... Echo's wings are surfboards. And then the hair is kind of, like, interesting. It's got, like, that Olympic torch type look to it. It's also blue, and it's kind of, like, wavy, and it glows. So definitely gives some beach vibes on that front. And then, again, as you mentioned, you have Lifeguard Pharah, which is, typical red-orange type armor. But with all the lifeguard skins, they gotta show off the abs, and, like, that's basically it, for the legendary skins on that one. So, like, I wasn't blown away by these skins, but it seems like, for the most part, maybe each event might have, like, one that you really want to go out and get. Like, for me, it's definitely the Brigida one, but the other ones, I could give or take. And that's saying a lot, because I really like playing Pharah. There's just, because she wears a ton of armor, it's kind of weird to have a lifeguard skin. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't really suit the purpose.
Right? Like, you have a scantily clad pharaoh who wears a lot of armor, and that's counterintuitive. Honestly, the best things in this package are the victory poses. Like, I don't know, did you see those?
I did. I did not write down any sort of
Okay.
description for them.
So Orisa is holding up a puppy with an Olympic medal around its neck. Okay, first off, that's awesome. Sigma is like floating, sitting on a rock, floating one, and Hammond is chewing on one. So those are probably the best things.
So Hammond still teething.
Yes.
He didn't learn from the Christmas lights.
No, he did not.
Well, I guess he just has to get sapped again. In that case, I have to say though, like the two new highlight intros, I actually really like both of them. There is the Anna Vacation highlight intro,
Yeah,
where
that's
you
pretty
see,
good.
you know, Anna beachside, you know, tropical drink in hand. I mean, I'm all for that. Then there's also the Ash one, which is target practice, where you see Ash shooted an apple off of Bob's head.
Yeah, those
So
are both good.
you know, if I don't unlock them, those are both ones that I would go out and spend my currency on. The new emote one is for Tracer, which is a warm-up one where you see Tracer doing all sorts of like stretches. You know, which makes sense because you know she's a sprinter. That one I'm you know, if I get it, I get it. If not, like it's not the end of the world. But
Mhm.
you know, again, like we got like some Olympic themed sprays. You know, you have a surfing one for Echo. Sigma has a swimming one. And there were a couple of voice lines that I already went out and grabbed. Like I really like the Ash one, which is the best way to win is to rig the game. You have Roadhog, who has no job too big, no score too small. And of course, with Soldier 76, just to continue the Dad 76 meme, they have a 4 to, you know, continue his golf persona. So, you know, there's some things here and there sprinkled in. Fortunately, skins aren't like spectacular by any means, but you know, we do get other skins outside of that via the weekly challenges, which have been really a staple of these events. So again, guys, you know, if you accrue 9 games each week, you unlock some new Pachimari icons at 3 wins. So there's a golf Pachimari, a surf Pachimari, and a baseball Pachimari. At 6 wins each week, there are sprays. There is all these are tied into the skins that you unlock. You have the Union Jack Tracer, which is like a sigil with the UK flag. There is the Sandcastle Bastion spray, which honestly, Ed, I think that is my favorite thing out of any unlockable this event. So you have Ganymede, who is essentially buried Bastion underneath the sand. You know, you see Bastion's head like sticking out. And, you know, Ganymede is completely rocking some beachwear. You know, he's in his swimsuit. He's got his, like, sunglasses on. I love it. Like, that's so hysterical to me. And then you have the Ice Cream Orisa spray, where basically, like, Orisa's head is, like, a banana split. So it's just, like... it's interesting. So, you know, to tie in with the skins... the Tracer skin you get the first week, and, you know, Tracer basically just in, like, a UK-type bodysuit. Sandcastle Bastion is the second week. Pretty self-explanatory. It definitely has more of a sand texture. And, you know, you do get, like, the structural integrity of a sandcastle with just this model type as well. And then you have this Ice Cream Orisa abomination where her legs are waffle cones, her torso is made of vanilla, and there's a cherry on top as like a hat. Joe, as I mentioned, I don't care how you try to paint Orisa, she's still not gonna be fun to play. Like,
No. Yeah, no, she's not ever going to be fun to play. But it's, you know what? These are just the free skins. I'll probably play some games this week. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get week 1. I should be able to get week 1 games, week 1 skin in. I'm going to be out of town this weekend, hanging out with the family, drinking White Claws in the lake. I know, rough life for Ednar. But you know, I'm gonna try and get it at least.
I just want that Ganon meat spray so bad. Like, you'll have to go in game and check that one out. But anyways, of course, Summer Games does mean the return of your absolute favorite event in regards to the arcade mode, Lucio Ball. Lucio Ball is back, Ed. I know you're excited, you're stoked, and we actually got some game mode changes. What is this? Like, I'll be honest, Ed, I was not expecting any Lucio Ball changes.
I'm leaving the Lucio Ball changes and talk about Lucio Ball 100% up to you, because honestly,
you're not gonna play.
Give two shits about it. They could be like, you know what? We put a fire volcano pit in the middle of the ring, and if you drive along near it, you insta die. Still don't care. Still never gonna play it.
But you know, you have to admit though, regardless of your feelings about Lucio Ball,
which sucks.
The fact that we actually have some changes to the seasonal event in some regard is a change of pace from what we have seen.
Yes, and yes. And I think the only reason they changed it up is because they do have the ranked mode.
Yes, Copa Lucio Ball is back.
Yes, Copa Lucio Ball. Like, so if they didn't have a ranked mode, I don't think they'd change anything about it.
I don't know, who knows? But anyways, we got Lucio Ball Remix, so we got some game mode changes that I'll talk about while you just sit there. So there are now 2 balls in play at once. There are bonus balls that are worth 3 points if you get a goal, and those will spawn periodically throughout the game. And then they also have a ton of like gameplay updates in regards to Lucio himself. So he moves faster. You have faster cooldowns. The punch and the boop range have been increased. Punch and boop are now partially affected by your facing to improve the ball control. You're now able to crouch in the air to drop down to the ground. And they also added some new custom game options if anyone wants to run some Lucio Ball tournaments during the event for, you know, the next 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it ends up being. But yeah, like, it makes for an interesting change of pace here because the scores are completely different from what you're used to seeing, especially with the introduction of, you know, a ball that's worth 3 points. But it is sped up more so than what you've kind of been used to seeing in the past. I've not had a chance to play it as of yet, but I do plan on seeing just how drastically different it is. But, you know, I at least appreciate the fact that, you know, last week we're like, well, we never really see any changes, right? Like, you know, I'm hyping up, like, this other game mode that I want to see introduced for Summer Games. And, you know, we got, like, a more arcadey version of Lucio Ball. So, you know, that will suffice for me. I know it's not ever going to appease you, but I'm still happy to see it in this case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I read that there's going to be... I just actually linked this to Totem. When I heard that there's going to be 2 balls out there, I just think back to the Futurama episode when Fry first goes to watch Blurns Ball, and there's the multi-ball hit. It's like, multi-ball! Multi-ball!
Mm-hmm.
That's what I picture Lucio Ball to be now. Lucio Ball has evolved into Lucio Blurns Ball.
There you go. I'll let you know if anyone mimics that during the games that I play. But
and
anyways,
if they don't, you should never pair with them again.
Yeah, block. Too bad I don't.
Yep.
There's not enough slots in order for me to do that, though. Unfortunately, so the dev team needs to get on that as well. So outside of that, in regards to the patch, Things one of them we've already kind of like talked about here recently, and that was the priority requeue for the backfilled games. So if you're in a situation where you join a game after it has already started to replace the player, so you've backfilled in this case, after you finish that game, where you backfilled, you are now granted the priority requeue. So the next time you queue up to play, regardless of what mode it is, you should see a small icon on the interface to denote your status. And then when you queue for a game, with that, the matchmaker will try to prioritize finding an appropriate game for you, which will result in significantly lower times waited in queue. And Ed, like, I'm sure both of us have been in that situation. You backfill, the game's over in like less than 30 seconds. You lose because obviously you're backfilling and it's 6v5, it snowballs, and then you're waiting in the full queue again, and it's just like, thanks for like the 100 XP, I guess.
Yeah, I've actually been the benefit of this because I did play a little, and I actually got backfilled when I queued in as DPS, and I requeued, and I went straight in, and like I was in another match as a DPS in
Nice.
under a minute, and it was glorious.
That's a pretty quick turnaround in regards to like a DPS.
Yeah, I was stoked. Like, it worked exactly how I wanted it to work.
Mhm.
So this is a great change. Great change. One of the better changes they've made in a long while.
Yep. Now, outside of this, something that's not going to pertain to us, modifications to high skill rating grouping restrictions. So
What you talking about, Willis?
to match the new max skill rating of 3,900 a player can achieve after finishing their placements, you can no longer queue for comp play in a group with more than 2 players if any player in that party is 3,900 skill rating or higher. So again,
Womp womp.
doesn't impact us. I'm really curious to see, now that all of these players who, are usually 4K or higher, how quickly they're able to climb back to that point. Now that everyone's going to be kind of like floating at that 3,900 since they can't place higher at that given point in time. But, not something that's going to impact us or, probably a majority of the listeners out there. I'm sure we have Grandmaster listeners as well. You never know. But no, just another change. And, it makes sense to match the other system that they'd already put in place.
Yeah, it makes complete sense, and obviously it doesn't affect us. But it's good for higher levels, and it gets more accurate high-end scores. You actually earn it. You don't get given it after playing 5 matches by being carried.
5 maps and then I'm done.
Yep. So yeah, it's good. It needs to be implemented, but we're not going to. 90%, 95% of the people who play this game are not even remotely affected by this game, by this change.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is everything for the week. Pretty eventful week. We actually went over an hour and a half, which is a nice change of pace.
Right? It's
crazy,
like we're
like,
going
we
back
have
to
news.
the old days.
Not quite.
Not quite. We're
Not
not
quite.
quite at 2 hours.
Maybe when Overwatch 2 is here.
Oh, when Overwatch 2 comes, we might have to have like a 2-part episode.
Well, who knows? Gamescom is coming up. I just, we're hoping announcements, please, Blizzard.
Yeah.
We don't want to wait until BlizzCon. But anyways, let's close out the show for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, do us a favor, head on over to iTunes, write us a review, let us know how we're doing, if there's anything you would like to see us incorporate into the show. We are open ears, always looking for feedback on that front. If you would like to support our podcast network directly, you can do so via our Patreon, where we have tiers starting at just $1 a month. And you can find more info there at patreon.com/OWL Network, or you too can join the likes of our master and above patrons, Daniel, Owl, and Kesha, in helping our network grow. In regards to the network, guys, quick update on that front. Overwatch Recall as a podcast and, podcast directory, weekly podcast listen, all back. Ramses and I released a new episode earlier today. So the plan is for the podcast episodes, roughly 30 minutes. You get Overwatch news, esports news, focusing more so on the bigger stories out of the week, and then we cover, what's happening around the Overwatch podcast scene, as well as, doing creator interviews here and there as, like, standalone episodes. So look for the feed, if you have our, portal page or whatever that provider page. I can't remember what iTunes fucking calls it anymore, but that's besides the point. If you have the provider page that lists all of our, podcasts, obviously you can find it there, or just search Overwatch Recall in that case. And we do have a website for Overwatch Recall at owrecall.com. You can find more information there, as well as the podcast directory, the weekly recall, all of that good stuff. All right, now that I got that out of the way, Ed, please let our listeners know how they can contact our show.
Alrighty. So you can reach us. Hold on. Yeah. You can reach us through email at hndoverwatch@gmail.com. We are on Twitter, and that's at hndoverwatch. We do have a website you can go to, and that's owlnshow.com. We are on YouTube at youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We do have a Discord. You can join us there at discord.me/OWLNshow. We are streaming live on Twitch at twitch.tv/OWLNshow. We are a Twitch affiliate, so help support the show by subscribing to our channel and earn our network emoticon. Our podcast network does stream pretty regularly. So on Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific, we have the Overwatch League Network. On Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, we have OWL by the Numbers. On Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, we have this show, Heroes Never Die. And then on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, we have Tavern Tales, a Hearthstone Battlegrounds podcast. And that airs live over at twitch.tv/TavernTalesHS. You can follow me directly on Twitter at Edinar, at Edinar83, and on Twitch at twitch.tv/Edinar. Totem, where can they find you at?
Well, you can find me over on Twitter at TumblelyDrunk, as well as Twitch at twitch.tv/TumblelyDrunk, where I stream Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, typically around 7 p.m. Pacific time. But again, guys, that will do it for us here tonight on Heroes Never Die. You've been listening to episode number 218. Enjoy the Countdown Cup. Get your games in for your weekly challenges. And we'll see you guys back next week. Have a good night.